Have you ever wondered what ordinary heroes look like? They're not wearing capes or flying through the sky, they're standing right next to you, carrying the weight of their world on tired shoulders while still finding strength to save others. This is the story of one such hero. If this journey of courage against all odds touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary power of everyday people. Mark Callaghan never wanted to be noticed. At 42, his receding hairline and the permanent dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights and endless worry. 5 years after losing his wife to cancer, he was still learning how to be both mother and father to their daughter, Sophie. His world had narrowed to two priorities: raising his 12-year-old daughter and keeping his job as an aircraft maintenance engineer at Denver International Airport. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Mark kissed Sophie's forehead as he dropped her at school, promising to be at her science fair that evening no matter what. "Cross my heart, Soph," he said, making their special gesture, a finger drawn across his chest. The smile she gave him was worth every exhausted moment of his double-shift existence. At work, Mark blended into the background of the busy tarmac, until Flight 2187 arrived for its routine maintenance check. The aircraft belonged to Pinnacle Airlines, where Diane Winters had just been promoted to operations director. Mark knew Diane from their training days 15 years earlier. Back then, she had been the ambitious one, while he'd been the one with natural talent. Life had taken them in different directions. "Well, if it isn't Mark Callaghan," Diane announced, loud enough for the surrounding crew to hear as she approached with her team of executives. "Still turning wrenches while the rest of us moved up in the world?" Mark felt heat rise to his face but kept his eyes on the maintenance checklist. This was just another day, another dollar for Sophie's college fund. "My daughter says hi," he replied quietly, knowing Diane would remember Sophie as a toddler from company picnics years ago. Diane's laugh cut through the mechanical hum of the tarmac. "Still using that poor kid as an excuse not to advance your career? Some things never change." She turned to her entourage. "Mark here was once the most promising engineer in our class. Then he decided changing diapers was more important than changing the industry." The laughter that followed burned into Mark's memory, but he continued his inspection. He'd learned long ago that responding to mockery only fed it. Besides, he had never regretted choosing flexibility for Sophie over career advancement, not even once. As the executives moved on, Mark noticed something unusual in the left engine housing, a hairline fracture that didn't match any normal wear pattern. Following protocol, he documented it and continued his inspection, finding 2 more anomalies that triggered his internal alarm. The maintenance record showed a recent repair using parts that didn't match the manufacturer's specifications. Mark approached his supervisor, showing him the discrepancies. "I need to ground this aircraft for a full inspection. That's Winter's pet project, Callaghan. She's rushing this plane back into service for some VIP flight tomorrow." The supervisor looked nervous. "Are you absolutely certain? The irregularities in the turbine blade alignment could cause catastrophic failure under the right conditions," Mark explained. "We can't clear this for flight." Word traveled quickly. Within an hour, Mark found himself facing Diane and her team in the hangar office. Her expression had hardened from mockery to fury. "Do you have any idea what's at stake here, Mark? This aircraft needs to be airborne by tomorrow morning. The CEO and board members are on this flight." Mark stood his ground. "Then they deserve to fly on a safe aircraft. These deviations from standard aren't minor." "It's just your professional jealousy," Diane snapped. "You can't stand that I've succeeded while you've stagnated." She turned to Mark's supervisor. "Get someone else to sign off on this inspection." Mark felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Sophie's school. His heart dropped. The science fair was starting in an hour, and he had promised to be there. But walking away now meant letting an unsafe plane fly. "I can't let this go, Diane," he said quietly. The thermal imaging shows a developing stress fracture that could compromise the entire engine assembly. Under high-altitude pressure, combined with the non-regulation parts installed last week, this could lead to catastrophic failure. "You always were dramatic," Diane scoffed. "I've got 3 other engineers who disagree with your assessment." Mark looked at the men standing behind Diane. None would meet his eyes. He recognized the look of people choosing career advancement over safety protocols. He'd seen it before, and aircraft had gone down because of it. His phone buzzed again. Sophie would be waiting for him now, scanning the audience for her dad who had promised to be there. The same dad who had missed her ballet recital last month because of an emergency shift change. Mark made a decision. "I'm officially logging my safety concern and recommendation to ground this aircraft." He completed the digital form on his tablet, submitted it, and looked at his watch. "And now I have a science fair to attend." He could hear Diane's derisive laughter behind him as he walked away. There he goes again, choosing daddy duty over doing what it takes to succeed. Mark made it to the science fair just as Sophie was setting up her project, a meticulous model demonstrating how pressure systems work in aircraft engines. The irony wasn't lost on him. His daughter had inherited his passion for understanding how things work. Her face lit up when she saw him, and for a few precious hours, Mark pushed aside his concerns about Flight 2187. That night, after tucking Sophie in, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept reviewing the inspection in his mind, calculating the risk factors. Finally, at 3 a.m., he made a call to the FAA's anonymous safety hotline, providing detailed information about the issues he'd identified and the pressure to ignore them. Dawn found him back at the airport, watching from a distance as Flight 2187 underwent final preparations. His report had triggered an emergency inspection, but he needed to see for himself what would happen. When he saw the FAA inspectors arrive and ground the aircraft, relief washed over him. What happened next played out like a nightmare in slow motion. A thorough inspection revealed that Mark had been right, and the situation was even worse than he'd thought. The combination of stress fractures and incompatible parts created a condition that would have likely resulted in an engine explosion shortly after takeoff. News traveled fast. By afternoon, Mark was called into a meeting with airline executives and FAA officials. Diane sat at the table, her face ashen. "The simulation results confirm it," said the chief FAA inspector. "Had this aircraft taken off, the engine would have catastrophically failed approximately 17 minutes into flight, most likely causing an explosion that would have compromised the wing structure." The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. A plane full of people, including the company's leadership, had been saved from disaster. The airline's CEO cleared his throat. Who was responsible for identifying these issues initially? All eyes turned to Mark. For once, he didn't try to blend into the background. "I was just doing my job," he said simply. "The same job I've been doing for 15 years. In the days that followed, Mark's world changed. The story leaked to the media, a single father who stood his ground against corporate pressure and potentially saved dozens of lives. Journalists wanted interviews, the airline wanted to present him with a safety award, Diane wanted to apologize. Mark accepted the apology but declined the publicity. "I'm not comfortable being called a hero for doing what any good engineer would do," he told Sophie as they walked home from school a week later. "I was just being thorough." Sophie squeezed his hand. "But you are a hero, Dad. Not just because you stopped a plane from exploding, but because you never miss my science fairs." 3 months later, Mark accepted a new position, heading up a safety compliance team created in the wake of the incident. The role came with better hours and higher pay, but most importantly, it allowed him to be home for dinner with Sophie most nights. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant being mocked or overlooked, but Mark had learned that standing your ground eventually leads to solid footing. As for Diane, the incident had changed her too. The near disaster had forced her to re-evaluate the corners she'd been cutting in her rush to the top. At the ceremony where Mark was officially recognized for his actions, she approached him with genuine humility. "You know, Mark, I always thought choosing career over everything else was strength," she admitted. "I never understood that what you were doing, putting your daughter first, refusing to compromise on safety, that was the real courage." Mark thought about the years of mockery he'd endured for his choices, the promotions he'd passed up, the way he'd been marginalized for prioritizing single fatherhood alongside his career. None of that mattered now. "We all have different paths," he told her. "Mine just happened to lead me to that engine on that particular day." Sometimes life's most important moments come disguised as our greatest challenges. For Mark Callaghan, being mocked on that runway had been just another test of his resolve, a resolve forged through years of choosing what was right over what was easy, what was important over what was impressive. That night, as he helped Sophie with her homework, Mark reflected on how close they had come to disaster, how a single compromise could have changed everything. He thought about all the other Mark Callaghans out there, the quiet heroes who stand their ground when it matters most, often without recognition or reward. "Dad," Sophie asked, looking up from her textbook, "are you happy with your choices? Do you ever wish you'd done things differently?" Mark smiled at his daughter, this brilliant, compassionate person who made every sacrifice worthwhile. "Not for a single moment," he answered truthfully. Sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is simply refuse to be less than who we are, even when the world mocks us for it. Mark Callaghan had saved lives not because he sought to be a hero, but because he refused to be anything less than thorough, responsible, and true to himself, qualities he hoped to pass on to his daughter along with his love of engineering. If this story of quiet courage in the face of mockery and pressure has touched your heart today, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Because in a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, we believe in amplifying stories of those quiet heroes walking among us, the ones who save lives simply by doing their jobs with integrity, even when no one is looking. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground, even when you stand alone.